Hi all, my name is Aryan and today I'm going to share 10 HTML development tips I believe every developer out there needs to know. These are some of the tips generally not covered in HTML tutorials, and learning them will help you reduce the use of JavaScript in your code and also help you enhance your user's experience. So let me start with the first one, the tip number 1. Did you know that you can edit div like a text area? If you plug the attribute content editable equals to true in an element, it will make it behave like a text area, but you can edit it in the browser itself. So this is basically all suitable, especially when building a WYSIWYG editor in HTML. It is relatively easier for WYSIWYG editors to render output in content editable div. So here's an example. Here I have a div with content editable, and you see I am able to modify the content. Now moving on to the second tip, refreshing a web page at a specified interval. Now as you can see on the screen, this is my quotes generator. It refreshes itself every given interval and you see a new quote every specified number of seconds. Now how do we do it? Let me tell you the secret. The meta HTTP EQIV tag with the content attribute is used to simulate an HTTP header. So if we make a clever use of it, we can do a lot of things. So for now, let's just refresh the web page every 15 seconds. So I'm going to paste this meta element right between the head tag, and that's all. Now let's move on to the next tip. Tip number 3. Now our other tip has to do with checkboxes. Checkboxes are that tiny input element we use for Boolean inputs. So you know, it's so tiny to point and click on them, but you can make a use of labels. A label element with a for attribute points to an element with an ID as specified in the for attribute. You can also use labels without the for attribute. Just wrap the element between the label itself, and this is so much preferred with checkboxes. So now I guess you know that how you can label your checkboxes. So now moving on to the next tip. Tip number 4, unifying form inputs. So this happened to me plenty of times. My form inputs were scattered all over the place outside the form tag. And earlier I had to rely on JavaScript to unify those all, but you don't have to. Just add the form equal to the ID of the attribute to the input element with an ID of the form you want to target, and that's all. You have unified it all. No matter where the inputs are scattered around, the form will be submitted with all of them. So let me show you an example. Now as you can see, the inputs are spread over the place. So these inputs are out of the scope of the form element. Now what I'm going to do is add the form attribute to the input itself, and let's try and test the form. Now as you see, when we submit the form, the inputs get submitted as well, despite being spread outside the form tag. Now moving on to the tip number 5. So did you know that you can submit one single form with multiple submit methods, and that too without any JavaScript? Adding an input type submit with an attribute of form method post or get will override the form method type defined earlier. So now if you add 2 such buttons with different method in each, you will be able to submit the same form in 2 different methods. Sounds cool? So why not try it and let me know in the comments below. Tip number 6, submitting a form through a new tab. A link tag with a target blank attribute opens the link in a new tab. You might know that already. So it basically opens a new tab and makes a GET request and displays the result on that new page. So you can do that with forms too. So if you add the form target blank attribute to the form input type submit, you will be able to see the result on the new page, whether it is a post request or a GET request, doesn't matter. So this technique is very common when communicating with third-party API or services. So now moving on to tip number 7, disabling HTML5 validation temporarily. HTML5 validations brought us so many new things. Form validations are one of the few. You can add HTML form validations to a form and it will be validated on the client side, of course. So suppose you have a large form with validation placed. So during the development process, it becomes cumbersome to remove out validation from each form input, and testing those one by one is also a very tedious task. So here comes the magic. There are 2 ways you can disable form validations temporarily. So either you can use the no validate attribute on the form tag, or just add the form no validate attribute on the input type submit. Now it disables your validations temporarily, and you can use the form as if it does not have any validations. So please note that if you're using JavaScript for validations, this won't work. Now moving on to tip number 8. Tip number 8 is loading images based on the screen sizes. So did you know that you can load different image based on different screen sizes? Yes, it's possible with the most loved img tag itself. Apart from the src attribute, the img tag has another attribute called src set, which accepts an image URL and screen size. Now when it finds the appropriate size range, it fetches the image from the URL and displays it. So this solves one of the bigger problem of responsive image sizing and proper aspect ratios. If you find this technique very useful, please do not forget to like this video. It really helps. Moving on to tip number 9, grouping select boxes. So this one's a little too common and chances are you already know about it. So if there are too many options in your select input box, you can organize them properly with a label using the opt group tag. It will make your select boxes appear nice and organized. Now your users won't have to search for options in a huge list of items, and things can be found pretty easily. Now let's move on to the last tip of the day. Auto-focusing inputs on page load. If you want one of your form inputs to be activated automatically as soon as the page loads, you don't have to rely on JavaScript. You can make use of the autofocus attribute on inputs. Add this attribute to a form input when you want your users to start at, and when the page loads, the input is in focus. And certainly this will contribute to enhancing your user experience overall. That is it for now. I'll be coming with another video and another set of awesome tips. And if you like these tips, then make sure to like the video and also tell me in the comments below which was the tip that you liked the most. And please consider subscribing to my channel if I have burned it for you. Now till then, have a good day, stay tuned, stay happy.